and this is the decolonial Thanksgiving stream. Big quotes around that Thanksgiving, where we will have our group of indigenous relatives from all across the earth, including Sioux, Shaw, Mary, who is not with us quite yet. We're still waiting. Myself, of course, I'm from Hawaii, Silver Spook. Saber is from is African living in the UK. You can correct me later on when you do your intro. And Akemi is, of course, another relative that is of indigenous Uchinanchu, which is the indigenous people of Okinawan descent. This is, kind of an informal get away from the relatives that, maybe you're gonna be a little harder to see this holidays, and also, just chat with our, friends and relatives from across the earth. And, we'll be discussing a variety of topics. It's mostly just kind of a place for us to gather. And, it's COVID-19 also. So it's kind of, we don't want to be physically doing too much. Not that we want to also buy plane tickets and burn the planet some more with, thousands of pounds of CO2 emissions flying on planes right now. But anyways, without further ado, let me see if I can get this stream up on the, 1 second. Okay. Let's see. Akemi, maybe you want to go first since you're already up on the screen there. You just introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi. Yeah. Hi, Gusio. Hajimitiya. Wanne Akemi Aibin. Tasuke onegaisabira. That's in Uchinaguchi, which I've been trying to practice a little bit. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Akemi. Pleased to meet you all. Like Silver Spook said, I'm Uchinanchu, Okinawan, which is like a recent discovery based on my last name because of readings and complex, but also simple things. But I'm a little nervous. I don't do this a lot. But nice to meet everyone, and I'm excited to hang out with you.
Awesome. Good to have you. Don't worry about it. This is like a inside pro tip. I only give this to my $50 Patreons, but this is what I want to tell you right now. I have no idea. Every single time I stream, I have no idea what the heck I'm gonna say. I've shown my notes on the stream. I don't even know what I'm gonna say. It just literally flows through me, like the ancestors, like what I had for dinner, random cyberpunk, nostalgia, 1980s video games. It all just comes out. Okay, that's my pro tip. So if you're feeling nervous when you're streaming, and I have successfully made a career, I'm making millions of dollars streaming. So buy my book. No, I'm just kidding. But don't worry too much. I'm of course being somewhat facetious, but don't worry about it. I want this to be like not super tense because I want people to just relax, because you may be having some less fun get-togethers, I know, this holiday season. So this is supposed to be like a more like that. Anyways, Lasu, go ahead and introduce yourself. Yeah.
Hello, Tonichiro, Toshpa. How y'all doing? I'm Lasu. I'm a Dakota Sioux from up in so-called Canada. Yes, that's where all the wild stuff is going on the coast. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
But otherwise, I'm really great to be here. Really great to share this day of gratitude. And I'm probably getting to more about it for us Indigenous people, like on the mainland and more like in North America, how we do things with our celebrations of ceremonies and stuff, especially the ones of giving thanks. But other than that, yeah, I'm just, glad to be here, honored to be here with all of these honored guests and all of you in TV world or Twitch world, whatever we want to call it.
Awesome. Yeah. Good to be Always good to see our brother Sioux. Our Kola. Kola means brother, correct? Is that what it means?
Yeah, friend or brother. Yeah.
Friend or brother. Okay. All right. And
In this instance, it would be brother.
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Cause I know, yeah, when Sue hits me, I'm like, Kola, what time is it? And I'm like, I get the time wrong. And I'm like, and then I'm sorry about that too. Also, I messed the time up a little bit. But anyways, yeah. It was, it's, Saber is our next, guest, long time, friend also from up there in, the parent of the United States and Canada in a lot of ways, the United Kingdom. How's it going, Saber?
Oh, it's going well. It's going well. Thank you again for the invite, and I'm glad to be here with everyone. I am indeed in the UK right now, but I am originally from Uganda in East Africa. So, I'm definitely glad to be here. For those who don't know who I am a content creator. I make content essentially surrounding like Afrofuturism and like weaving in Pan-Africanism and also like in decolonial cyberpunk and soon to be more solar punk content and all of that too. So yes, thank you very much for having me on, and I'm definitely looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Sorry, I'm like trying to pay attention to what everybody's saying and playing weird stream Tetris with myself, so I'm sorry about that. I'll keep throwing Akemi's face all over the place. Anyways, but yeah, it's. I'm sorry, Akemi. I'm just, yeah. I don't mean to play ball with your base with our faces. Anyways, so what we want to do when I'm not
movie magic
discombobulated, trying to be the producer and this. But anyways, Holly is also here. Of course, Holly is as always our producer, and Holly will let us know when Shaw is in, and that's the last member. Shaw is doing very important work, so I don't want to, really, I didn't want to mess with Shaw's flow, because Shaw is actually doing very important work here as a frontline defender of, I think it was at Stop Line 3, recently was at the DC Indigenous actions, getting her phone taken, getting attacked by the U.S. federal and state police, and like the stream, actually, we were doing a Luna Oi panel, like an Indigenous educational panel on Luna's channel, and it was like the phone malfunctioned because it was taken by the cops, and after the phone was given back in Washington D.C. doing this like massive like Indigenous action, and the phone actually didn't work after it would like die and it would malfunction, and it went really slow after the police took it for being an Indigenous person asking the United States or any settler colonial government to follow their own laws. I'll put that in scare quotes, just like Thanksgiving. But anyways, so we're waiting for Shaw, but we'll see. Shaw said I might have some things to run, but Shaw is also a member of the Indigenous Environmental Network that is currently, they were at the COP26 and they're currently organizing other actions. I'm sure they're in contact with the people in so-called Canada against those horrible actions that are happening up there. But anyways, I kind of want to leave it free form up to people, but I figure we'll probably get into the more serious stuff at some point or another. But I was just thinking, like, just generally, Thanksgiving. I mean, I don't know for everybody who's coming into this stream and going to watch it, it's unclear like where people are with their, how should we say it, undoing the diseducation of especially people who are from the United States, Canada, raised within their formal education systems. So it depends on where everybody might be at a different point in that process of kind of like decolonizing their own thinking. But I don't know, like, we could maybe start with like some of the I don't know, practices that some of you might do. I know some of us are not even in the United States, so Thanksgiving doesn't really even apply. But maybe like what when you hear Thanksgiving or you think about that, or think about rituals surrounding giving thanks, not necessarily that holiday. I don't know if anybody wants to jump in, just like what do you think about that? Like, it could be something you do or practices you have. I think somebody mentioned some of those giving thanks ceremonies.
I suppose I can go first
Yeah,
actually,
yeah, go
considering
for it.
I'm the only one outside of the UK. So like, my experience with Thanksgiving actually is only, or like for the longest time was only limited to like seeing like US media. You know, it'd be like certain, you know, I'd be watching certain shows or whatever, and then there's a time where it's like, oh, it's Thanksgiving dinner and stuff like that. But like in terms of our own like learning, we didn't really have any big emphasis on Thanksgiving itself until I'd say like as social media started to become more prevalent, because like, you know, especially as like more brands and stuff like that are wanting to just capture as much of the market as possible when it comes to Thanksgiving. They always want to do some kind of like promotion or something like that, like to try to promote their brand and all that. But like when it comes to, you know, Thanksgiving itself, I'm the more that I learn about the sort of US history, especially considering now that I'm a content creator, the more I'm just like horrified by the fact that like people in the US still celebrate it as a holiday. And considering that it's so-called, um, you know, a lot of the media tends to portray itself as, you know, somewhat progressive and all of that in some instances. But like as I learn more about, you know, especially considering this for context, like the latest video that I made when I was studying the, you know, Haitian Revolution and the history of of Haiti and stuff like that, looking into when Christopher Columbus landed there in 1492. I'm looking at the destruction that he caused over there in the so-called New World, and how like, you know, genocidal it was straight up. And considering all of that, it's like, you know, the fact that it's still being so, you know, people celebrate it so heavily just kind of demonstrates to me anyways how uh I don't know, just how reactionary the United States still is to this day, and how much pushback there is against people, or indigenous peoples over there trying to, you know, speak the truth about the, you know, the realities of the history of the United States, which is still like barely ever taught from my understanding. So yeah, like if it wasn't for me going out of my way to understand or to learn or to speak to people like you, we wouldn't really know. Like a lot of people here still don't really know a lot of what's happened over the last like half a millennium. So, yeah, this is why like these kinds of streams are so important, to try to have a decolonial perspective on things like Thanksgiving. So, yeah, that's my little take. Yeah.
Yeah, it must be weird to be in the UK. That anything in the US, isn't it? US is like this, like up this these little traders made their little camp on you know, over there in that continent, you know, right? That's like it's like Rebellion Day. Independence Day is like those time, the day when those sellouts sold out the British Empire.
Mhm. Yeah. So it's like just, yeah, it's like, damn, like just following the trajectory, like as I've said a few times, like in the past, like it's so very disconnected. Like we don't really even learn about the connection between the sort of British colonies in the so-called New World, and like when they left in the UK. So it's very disconnected. So we really do have to go out of our way to learn this stuff like on our own, because it's not really taught. Because I feel like if the history of Europe and, you know, America was really taught as it was, it would really demonstrate just how, I don't know, just how genocidal this entire project has been, and how destructive it has been for indigenous people. So it's just, so yeah, and it's definitely one of the conversations that I've been having throughout this past week, especially with people, as well. Considering like a lot of my friends are from the sort on that from that side of the world, I'm kind of tapped into to Thanksgiving, so I kind of know, like, I'm kind of familiar with it, because people have been talking about like some of the things that's going on around surrounding like Thanksgiving and stuff. So like some of the things that I'm talking about when it comes to like what's happening, what has happened in the history of the so-called United States is news to a lot of people that are my age, people that are much older. There's the first times that they are hearing about a lot of the destructive things that have been done in the name of like so-called progress, right? And it's just, yeah. And I feel like the more like our voices get out there, the more like we educate people on the realities of the world, I think that like we can definitely like correct that history too, because there's a lot that has to be told. There's a lot that has to be, you know, if we are to tell the real history of like where we are and how we got to where we are right now, it's it'll be hard for a lot of people to hear, especially those who are the current like beneficiaries of the system, I think. But like, it has to be out there, because right now, that the systems that were in place right back then, it's not disconnected from the systems that we have right now. It's a continuum almost, and it is essentially straight up is a continuum. So in order to fully decolonize our minds, we have to look at the history, like, and to essentially deconstruct and reconstruct our way back to where we are right now, acknowledging the realities of sort of settler colonialism, and all of that. So
yeah, totally. It's sad. It's kind of like being in the U.S. and being actually, I would argue, just being in the Western world. I use that phrase all the time. I try to use Star Wars actually in an anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist sense. And I always say, like, I'm half Stormtrooper, and English, Spanish, and French are all Stormtrooper languages. And so you're trying to decolonize is trying to like start a rebellion on the Death Star when you're in a place that speaks English, French, or Spanish, and you're in that world already of the colonizer, because you're in in the Western left analysis terms, it would be like the ideology of any place is always the ideology of the ruling class, and the ideology of the ruling class in the United States, Canada, the Euro settler colonial, or what's sometimes roughly called the Western world, is white supremacist, capitalist, imperialist, and so you start from there. Like, I'm a native Hawaiian, so like I often bring up, our language was illegal to speak, period. And then we had patriotic education. We're taught, put your hand over your heart. We're just sing multiple patriotic songs per day. They like to accuse China and North Korea and places that America wants to stop from decolonizing and doing what they need to do, of being brainwashing their people into nationalistic, hyper-militarized culture. But the United States is the number one in all of these things, as a successor of the British Empire. It's really the Anglo-Saxon continuation: the U.S., Canada, Britain, Australia, and New Zealand. In a lot of ways, this is why we speak English. You should ask, why are you even speaking? Why aren't we speaking Hawaiian? Why aren't we speaking the indigenous languages on Turtle Island, right? We're speaking English because we're part of the Anglo-Saxon Empire, and we're all part Stormtrooper, whether we want to or not. And so trying to undo that is, it's like trying to it's like trying to start even trying to share this stream around. I couldn't. Instagram, Twitter, Discord I don't even try to put. I just put pop culture. I put like Star Wars, or I put like Squid Game, or Dune. Here's what I think. Here's my take on pop cultural phenomenon X. Because when I put the actual word, like, it actually said this is sensitive. Like, it actually gave me a warning. You can't post this, or I'll just get shadow banned. Holly just got shadow banned on Twitter. When you actually talk about attacking the Death Star, that's why I call it the Death Star satellites. When you use Twitter, any of these platforms we're currently on, English, Western capitalist world headquartered platforms, you're already in enemy territory. So it's very hard. And that doesn't. That's why I say, while we have access, so that's why I try to, like, you have to kind of be careful. But there is no other option, especially for people that are like myself and Sioux, and well, actually everybody here, really. We don't have an option except to try to fight internally to, the empires that we are in, the settler, especially the settler colonial ones that I'm in, and Sioux and Akemi, we're all in, and just colonial ones that Saber's in. But we have to do our best, and so that's why we're doing the stream. And I should stop talking because this is not my talking time. Sioux. What is going on up there?
No. Cool up, please. Sisters first.
What's that?
Sisters first.
Sisters first. Okay, sisters first. Okay, Akemi, you gotta go.
I didn't mention, but maybe this is a good time to mention. I use gender-neutral pronouns, and
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
I never know like what word to. No, you're good. I didn't mention it, and I forgot to. But I've been like very in my watching. I watched Kumahina yesterday, which is a documentary about Kumahina, which is a who is a Oahu in Hawaii, and I don't know, just I wish I knew more about like history and things like that in Uchinanchu culture to see if like not if but like what the words were for people like us. Yeah, so that was a good time to bring that up. What was the question?
Oh, no, you just, I forgot what the question was. I went off in like 3 different directions. But importantly, I think, just, we don't have to jump in. I know we've had a few discussions about, the indigenous Okinawa. There's the harder, more painful stuff about Okinawa, but, I don't know. Here's something I should bring up now. I'm going to play, I'm trying to learn at least one song in every one of my indigenous relatives' cultures of Earth. That's like thousands of songs I have to learn by the end of this. But yeah, I got like maybe 3. I have 2 from Okinawa because I should bring that up as speaking of who we are. I'm also Asian and Pacific Islander. My heritage is Asian Pacific Islander. I also have colonizer, cowboy, murdering ass white settler colonial racist heritage, also an imperial Japanese heritage, which is its own thing. But I'm Asian and Pacific Islander, so I have also been throwing this back into Akemi's lane, learning. I know 2 indigenous Uchinanchu. Uchinanchu, as we were talking about, is like the indigenous people of what's called Okinawa, which is what the U.S. backed, working together with the Imperial Japan, calls Okinawa as part of Japan, but is in fact their own people. And I'm trying to learn as much as I can about this because also the Austronesian peoples, the native Hawaiians descended from the Austronesian peoples, the Hakka people of Taiwan, hot place right now, Taiwan, Okinawa, Hawaii, Maori, people of Madagascar near Africa. We're all related in this multi-tens of thousand year old ocean voyaging and pretty unique culture. And anyways, so I'm trying to learn. What's I gonna say? I'm gonna sing one of all the songs that I haven't sung because Akemi said, "Oh, I want to hear this song." I said, "Yeah, I've been learning this song. It's in like a specific dialect. It sounds like Japanese, but it's not quite. It's actually each island has a slightly different dialect. Anyway, I should let you do this. But I don't know. You could anything related to Uchinanchu because nobody knows about this. I have like in this image up here. You see, and it says no military bases. I don't know if you can see this. It says military bases out. That is a protest in and right next to it there's a picture of a singer and somebody playing a drum. That's the indigenous one of the indigenous people and one of their styles of dance and singing. I'm actually going to do one of her songs. Her name is Rimi Natsukawa. Anyway, but the U.S. military has Hawaii is illegally occupied with U.S. military illegally on our islands, but Okinawa has like almost all of their territory is literally like poisoned, like environmentally, socially, psychologically. It's like a giant, like cancerous tumors are of U.S. military bases. COVID-19 there was like hundreds of thousands of cases because the U.S. troops are just flooding that island, sickening people. There's all kind of abuse on that island, and people need to know. People need to know this. This is where the U.S. military and Canada and Australia, all of the Western and Japan are launching their aircraft carriers from, and nobody knows about these people that are like central to the fight of decolonization. People, when you think of decolonization, I'm decentering it a little bit out of strictly Turtle Island, but it includes decolonization of all of the Pacific, and this came up, of course, in the Pacific and Asian panels. And so, anyway, I'm sorry, I'm doing your thing for you. So, I don't know, just anything related to Okinawa and the culture there because people need to know more. And you've done more research than me. I'm certain. I just opened my mouth too much.
My memory hasn't been so great lately, but there are one of the biggest things that comes to mind is how as far as I understand, in like mainland Japan, a lot of people consider Okinawan to be just a dialect, and there is a dialect of like a mix of Okinawan, one of the Uchinaguchi, which is the most widely spoken of the Okinawan languages, the Luchu languages. because it was used by the Luchu Kingdom, and so more people used it than just the regional areas. But like you said, there's I think 5 officially recognized ones, but there's like 7, probably even more, probably one for each island, maybe. Even on the island of Okinawa, there's Uchinaguchi, which was used by Central Okinawa, and there's I can't even remember the name of it right now. Kunigami? Not sure, but it's used by Inogimi, which is where my family's from, in that northern part, just like a little northern part of Okinawa. Uses that dialect. That keep saying dialect and mixing all these words, but each of the languages are mutually unintelligible. And then with Japanese, it's also mutually unintelligible, so people can't understand each other, and mainland Japanese speakers, standard Japanese speakers, can't understand it. But there is like a fusion of Uchinaguchi and Yamatoguchi, which is like mainland Japanese, called Uchina Yamatoguchi, which is like a dialect fusion mix of it that's spoken by people today. But similar to Hawaii in Uchina, in the Uchu Islands, once it was annexed by Japan in the late 1800s. They like banned the culture, banned the language. If you were caught speaking it, you were given like a dialect tag saying I speak a dialect, and the only way to get it taken off was to tell on someone else, so breaking those bonds too. But yeah, language is really neat, and I learned that one of the words timu, which is used in timugukuru, which is the spirit of compassion. Timu is similar to the Hawaiian word for heart, where it also means gut. So I saw in the documentary I watched yesterday, she mentioned the Hawaiian heart, the na'au.
Yeah.
Na'au.
Yeah, na'au. Yeah.
And na'au, and in Uchinaguchi, Central Okinawan, it's timu, and it also means like heart, gut, both of those. Sometimes liver also. And I think Yaron mentioned also that in Maori it was similar, where it means heart and gut.
What was the one you said before that?
The one I don't remember the one from Maori off the top of my head.
Oh, is it Yuimaru?
Timugukuru, the spirit of compassion, and then there's also Yuimaru, the spirit of cooperation.
Right.
Which reminds me of hui.
Yeah, I always bring up the word hui because hui is a word in Hawaiian, Maori, Chinese, and Vietnamese. And Yuimaru, like I said, all these Asian Pacific cultures are very much close. We're very much related, and these are, I'll just, people probably know, but we're separated by thousands of miles. The Pacific is like massive. It's 1/3 of the Earth's surface. It's bigger than all the other continents together, but we still share the word hui across all that time and thousands of years. So, and Yuimaru, like hui, like the YUI is another word that's connected to that concept of.
Wait, do you know? So Akemi, you mentioned the whole thing about like, this is that whenever you speak the language and how they like penalize you for that, essentially. Is this something that has also been practiced in Africa as well, which is very interesting now that you said that, because and then this is also something that I learned from I think I mentioned this book before. It's called Decolonize the Mind by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. He's like an author in sort of Kenya area, and one thing that he highlights in that book is that like that was one of the practices that they used to essentially like split the bonds between people and to stop them from speaking their own like native language. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, if you speak the native language, or if you catch someone speaking language, you have to tell on the other person, and then it just keeps going until so it's a sort of a way to break apart the bonds that you have, as you said, but then also just to sort of disincentivize people to actually speak their own native languages as well. And I think that's a very powerful thing that like people don't necessarily really like think about. Like if the main language that you process your thoughts are the language of the colonizers, then that's also a way of just colonizing your brain. And so like in order to fully decolonize your brain, he suggests that like maybe we need to return to our sort of native languages as a base, and then of course to go on to learn our other languages, maybe it's English or whatever, things like that afterwards. Yeah, so it's very interesting that you mentioned that too, because it seems to be a common practice, right? It seems to be something that's like a thing that the sellers do to take us away from our cultures, take us away from our native ways of being and all of that. So.
Oh, just one thing before we continue, just to tie that in, there's a movie called Warriors of the Rainbow or Civic Ballet, which is it's actually made in Taiwan. Here's something you should know when you hear things about China and Taiwan. Taiwan, and I'll send it back to Akemi. I'm sorry to jump in here, but Taiwan is here. China is here, right? China is. I'm sorry if you can't see the map, but China is this large piece of the continent of East Asia. Taiwan is an island and is part of China that is right off the coast. 80 miles. Okinawa is, you can see Okinawa from Taiwan. It is part of a chain of islands that comes south from the tip of Japan, and it rings around towards Taiwan. And in fact, and the Taiwanese people also they have ancestral connections also to the Okinawan, what was called the Luchu. There's a great podcast, the Silk and Steel podcast by our friend Carl Jha, who was on a previous Silver Spook panel, who goes deep into this history and connects it into Okinawa. I love it. Yeah. I don't know if you've seen that as well. Yeah, Okinawa, which is or the Chinese had they called the Luchu people or the peaceful people. They were a very peaceful people, and they still are in many ways, which is why colonizers, when you're very peaceful, colonizers tend to show up with gunboats and nuclear weapons and language banning policies. And here's something that you should know if you have a second and you want to watch something, you want to learn a little bit and watch a movie. Warriors of the Rainbow is about the indigenous people, the Hakka people that are actually 30,000-year-old. I got to talk about the Austronesian people. The language sounds very similar to Samoan, which is next to us here in the Pacific. And Warriors of the Rainbow is a movie that involves the Japanese imperial. Some people go, Silver Spook, you just hate white people. I was like, no, it's not. That's not what it's about. I married somebody that's like fairer than a piece of printer paper sometimes. Especially when out of the sun. But it's not. That's not what it is. The Japanese also, as one of the peoples who are not from Europe that participated in banning of languages and crushing of people. Warriors of the Rainbow is a movie where the Japanese incursions into Taiwan against both Han and the Hakka people there.
Get him, Holly. Get him, Holly.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm gonna get beat up for that one later on. No. We don't violate TOS. Yeah, I shouldn't have said that. But no, I mean we hear it's important for people to know. I mean, it's important for me to know as well because I said I have Japanese ancestry, and so Warriors of the Rainbow is a movie where it deals with the crushing, the Japanese invasion. They banned the language of the indigenous people of one of the peoples of Taiwan, the one that had been there longer, the Hakka people, and also they banned the language. They had people marry into. The song I'm going to sing later is actually about this process of they would ask like some of the local people to marry into the Japanese family, and you could become a police officer, you could become a government official, like lower than Japanese, right? As an indigenous collaborator with the colonizer, you get a nicer house, you get more money, but you have to participate in beating. And in the movie, you see the police officer has to participate in beating children for speaking his own native language. That was the price, and you have to renounce your ancestry. You renounce your ancestors, you take on a Japanese ancestor, you change your name, you get a Japanese name. So that was, and this was used based on what Europeans did across the planet. So the Japanese were not quite as good as the Europeans. I shouldn't say that, but the process of imperial invasion, like I often say, indigenous means treating people. I mean, it's a complicated. I don't want to say, but part of being indigenous to me means me treating other people and cultures with. As equals, with win-win cooperation, as some of our indigenous relatives say, with peaceful trade, win-win cooperation, not win-lose colonization, win-lose taking and banishing and extermination of the culture and ways, right? So that's how you can really, because people move. It's important to know people migrate, people move, people, I'm moving somewhere else, but you can move peacefully. And, we have a lot of Chinese people that move to Hawaii peacefully. asked to be there, mutually cooperated. I'm the descendant of Hawaiian, and that's why I'm Hawaiian and Asian. And then there were other people from the United States that said, we're going to move, and then we're going to ban your language, they ban Hawaiian, and we're going to take all of your land, and we're going to oppress you all under this racialized capitalism called pineapple and sugar plantations. So it's very important for people to remember that, and remember that this is not simply hate. We just like people with low melanin count, and this is a specific colonization. Everything isn't colonization. Anything I don't like isn't colonization. It's a very specific thing that is incredibly destructive. It's tied in with concepts of capitalism, racism, slavery, but it's a pretty specific thing, and it continues in places like the United States, Canada, and around the world. And anyway, I'll stop talking but yeah, sorry, Akemi, we just keep hijacking you.
I can bring it back to language real quick because I remember the other week I was talking with some Moroccan friends, and they were telling me about how in Morocco a great amount of the population is Amazigh, which is an indigenous people of Morocco and other areas of North Africa, I believe. And they're trying now to get to make an alphabet, I believe, for like textbooks and stuff, to be able to have children's first language be a Amazigh. Tamazight is, I believe, how they say the languages. Amazigh means free people in their language. And there's like, it's difficult because there's like 33 different dialects, and trying to figure out how to make like something for example, for schooling. It needs to be more than just like things thrown on the wall of like, okay, we don't have a word for this, so let's make it that. You need to like really think about it and like recreate, not even recreate, because there's like things that didn't exist back when languages, more native languages were more widely spoken, that don't exist today. Like in a book I read called Lost in Translation, there was a passage about, I don't remember which of the languages it was. I want to say Inuit, maybe? I'm not even sure if that's how you say the language of it. But the word they were trying to come up with a word in the language for it was the internet, I believe. And they used a mix of words that meant something similar to like a shaman traveling through different realms. And like that gives you just like a whole different idea of what the internet is like conceptually, and it just shows how much language brings to the mind and just experience. Like with every language lost, there's a whole like life view and experience gone that we can never recover. And there's so much. It's something that I find myself grieving a lot, is how many languages, and how, like, even if we study every day, like there's so much more that we can't capture in time. But there's also so many new things to be found with like more people speaking multiple languages too, I think. Yeah, something that came to mind.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, Akemi, who's like, I'm worried I might not know what to say. You know what to say. I know. I'm very confident. I'm confident you know what to say, and everybody just learned a lot of things right there. Holly finds this very cool. Also, shout out to Holly. Thanks for dropping the links. Also, I'm sorry I just put never use your own partner, as some kind of tool of illustrating points. It's not a good thing. Anyway, Holly is
shout out to Holly. Holly's always there. Look, I was speaking about that book, Decolonize the Mind, and I look in the chat like 5 minutes later. I'm like, all right, Holly's already like linked it in the chat. I'm like, yo, that was fast as hell. Like, yo, that was quick. So yeah, definitely appreciate it.
Yeah,
but
Holly.
On that point,
okay.
On that point, I would also say that like it's just like I don't know, just studying a bunch of the history of just indigenous cultures all over the world. There is this like, it's like this bittersweet thing where it's like, okay, I'm learning all this stuff, but at the same time, there is a lot that has just been erased or just wiped out and replaced by the languages or the cultures of the settler colonists that came over and tried to essentially just wipe out everything that that we had. And it is a shame. It is very unfortunate. And sometimes it is very hard to process. And yeah, I would definitely say that, like, although they may not be things that we can fully recapture, I think that it is important to just like cherish what we do have, I think, as well at the same time, and then to try to move forward and like build upon like the things that we have now, and the things that we can like that we can, you know, that we do have like at the moment. Because it's like, yeah, I think that like you know, on the one hand, a lot of our ways of being, or you know, just essentially just conceiving the ways that we could have been right now if we weren't interrupted by like settler colonizers. I sometimes just think and imagine just how far we would be right now, or like how much more, how far, how you know, how advanced we would be right now if we weren't taken away from our ways of being, especially when we consider the issues that we're facing today with like climate change and all that, which is essentially a product of just a very exploitative system, whether it's like economic or political, right? And yeah, like again, I just think it's important to like keep in mind that, like, yes, you know, there's things that we may not be able to recover, but at the same time, I think there is a lot to be gained with the tools that we have now. And again, this is like our sort of historical moment type thing. Like the things that we're doing right now, these kinds of things, it's like we have to sort of like build our future, taking into consideration our indigenous ways of being, and then like applying it to our conditions today, and then also figuring out how to like essentially move past this empire, essentially this goddamn like Death Star, as Silver Speak has always said. You know, we gotta this, you know, we gotta move past this Death Star somehow, whether we gotta destroy it, you know, whatever. Yeah. And yeah, I don't know. It just seems like there is a lot that we can still mine from the past to allow us to liberate ourselves in the future. It's almost as though like there are like messages or like signals that are being like passed down throughout time from our ancestors that are trying to like push us to liberate ourselves from the system. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
No, totally. Just one quick thing I want to throw it to Sue. But speaking of, you know, in this time of great climate destruction, you know, yeah, I make these points all the time on my stream, so I don't want to belabor them too much. And I use a lot of Star Wars metaphors because I'm a nerd. And also everybody knows Star Wars, so everybody knows Star Wars. What am I? Yeah, but you know, indigenous people. Speaking of indigenous, I'm not sure where Shaw is, but just to represent Shaw, don't forget to follow Indigenous Earth Network, which is who Shaw works for. That is their North American network of indigenous people fighting for environmental justice and healthy communities. And also indigenous people, right? And I know I brought this up before on multiple videos, but it's very important for us to remember that if you care about literally saving this planet and all life on it and the biosphere, etc., indigenous resistance scientifically has staved off 25% of the United States and Canada's annual emissions. So speaking of, like, you know, it's not, you know, I have a song from my album called Indigenous Aloha Civilization. It's called like White Savior, White Peril. We don't need Luke or Obi-Wan. We don't need white Luke Skywalker coming in from settler colonizer world to save, you know, blow up. The Death Star is not going to be blown up. And we don't want to start any nuclear wars, but, you know, the end of imperialism, capitalism, racism, settler colonialism, I think is not going to come led by, you know, people who are literally still stormtroopers. It's going to come from people that are the actual rebellion, such as the indigenous people that materially have stopped 25% of US and Canada's annual emissions with all of their actions, such as the ones that are happening right now with the Wet'suwet'en, with the Giremten, and all the indigenous peoples and their supporters, and all of the collectively together up there in so-called Canada, and they have stopped the equivalent of 400 new coal-fired plants. It just as one way to think about this is if Indigenous people are 2% or less of the U.S., 4% or less of Canada, yet they're stopping 25% of the greatest. U.S. is the number one emitter on the earth, right? And they are doing that by that numbers. They are doing 12, they're doing 10, 12 times the work to stop carbon emissions per capita. If the settler colonizers, right? If white people did 1/10 of what Indigenous people do in the United States, it would be carbon neutral by that empirical statistics, right? So like literally that is, and I mean environmental scientists all know this, whether that's even South America, North America, South America, where the Amazon is not burning is where Indigenous people have control of territory. Not to say that everybody is perfectly, this is not, a 1-to-1 relationship, like, and everybody just because they have to have like a thing that says I'm 1/64th X and Y and Z tribe, which is also not, that's some Wendigo stuff right there. But people, the people and the cultures, right? And Native Hawaiians didn't view blood quantum as, Kanaka Maoli did not view that as a way of being. We did not view Hawaiianness as X amount of blood inside of you. That's a colonizer concept. Anyway, but the cultures and the ways are that which do have. They're like the Rosetta Stones of the future. As I often say, the most advanced civilizations and the most successful human civilizations, in terms of in every rubric: peace, racial equality, economic equality, technological advancement, economic development, have been Indigenous historically, and they are today, and they will be in the future. And now I can stop talking, and it's Lost Who's turn.
Hello, everyone. All of you out there on the interwebs, good to see you. Glad you're here. Glad you're nice and warm and at least relatively safe. Most importantly, around your home fires. So let's begin. First, I want to topple or get into the topic of Thanksgiving as we know it through the colonizer mindset. So, as we know throughout all of history, colonizer Europeans went out of their way to take at least some of the practices of the places that they colonized, so that it would be easier to make sure that people transitioned and became assimilated into the colonizer's way of life or lifestyle. Thanksgiving was always a traditional ceremony, one of the 3 traditional ceremonies that we have in Indigenous life, Indigenous world, of giving thanks for the bountiful harvests on this earth. Some tribes had 4 Thanksgiving ceremonies, some only had 3, depending upon where you were on the planet, so to speak. It was always about honoring and giving thanks to all the bountiful things and the good things that we have in our life. That was always those ceremonies. We still even have other ones where we also give thanks on like full moons, as well as other ceremonies. We call them upala, or gratitude ceremonies, that we give thanks for all the things in our lives, including the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. Because from all of it, we learn a lesson. We either learn to be grateful for the good things we have, and we learn from the horrible things, the valuable, important life lessons, and the growth and the inner strength that we developed from those lessons in our lives. Many people don't, it's either forgotten, and we're always focusing on the colonizer ideology of Thanksgiving. Yet it was taken from our Indigenous people's way of life, of celebrating and giving thanks for the harvest, for a bountiful harvest, and to ensure that future generations' bountiful harvests were ensured to happen for generations, right? So we always look 7 generations back and 7 generations forward in our decision makings and the things that we did. Yes, we have to remember the atrocious history that colonizers had done to us around the world, to indigenous people. Oh, you gotta bounce for a second? Bathroom break.
Yeah, keep it going, keep it going. You're spitting right now. Yes, keep going.
So like, yes, we have to remember these things. It is important and imperative for us to remember the atrocities that we went through and the things that were stolen and stripped from us. It is important to remember these things. Because if we don't see those lessons and learn those lessons from the past, we will never be able to stop the reoccurring cycle of it in the future and today. We have to know our history. We have to understand those things and learn from it and grow from it. We cannot allow ourselves to fill ourselves completely with anger and forget about being grateful and giving thanks to what we should be thankful for. It doesn't matter whether Europeans and colonizers have taken and how do I put it, appropriated our giving thanks ceremony. That doesn't matter. We should always still remember that we should still be practicing our traditional way of our ways of giving thanks. That is what is important. That is what we must maintain by honoring our ancestors in the way in which they lived pre-colonization and understanding those things and healing within inside of ourselves so that, yes, we can call out this indoctrination of, yeah, Thanksgiving is the pilgrims and blah, 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 blah. No, actually, it was appropriated from us indigenous people in giving thanks for that feast and good harvest for that year or that season. Decolonizing our mindset means that we're ever constantly working towards removing all that anger and hatred, all that rage, all that garbage that was put into our brains and our way of thinking by colonizers, and start getting back to the real people who we truly are. People who love, who have joy, who have gratefulness, who are thankful. People who have a spiritual way of life and find balance and harmony within inside of ourselves, because reality begins within. And we find that balance within inside of ourselves so that we are not, besides like getting angry all the time will give you stomach cancer. It's literally scientifically proven. If you're angry all the time, you will get sick, and you will get sick to the point that you die. That's not life. That's not living. That's not honoring our ancestors by continuing pushing forward to live life, to live and to give a life and make sure that there's a life still for the next 7 generations at least going forward, if not more. These are the traditional understandings of many indigenous people around the world, that colonization has worked its damnedest to make us forget. And we still have it. We still have a lot of our people still are stuck in the colonizer mindset, and they forget who they are. But they'll yelp and scream that they're this, but then they're still practicing all of the colonizers' mindsets and way and thinking and doing of things. And they forget they're pono, right? That's how you say it, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, Ho'oponopono, yeah.
Yeah, pono, yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Forgetting to forget, to forget your relatives, your relations, your family, your community. Oh, Saber, you still good?
Yes, I'm still here. I'm still here.
Okay. I just heard that go off and I didn't know whether that was someone was trying to get a hold of you.
I will ignore them. I will ignore them for your sake.
uh,
Please carry on.
So these are things that we have to constantly remind ourselves and work through and work towards. We started to be indoctrinated from the time after we were born and started to understand things and could understand and grasp concepts of things. We started to learn this very vile and disgusting thought patterns and ways of being that only bring harm. They don't bring love. They don't bring compassion. They don't bring respect. They don't bring life. They bring death and harm. It's a constant cycle of death and harm rather than life and gratefulness. And these are things that we have to constantly remind ourselves. This is why you see many Indigenous people doing standoffs and everything else, is because they remember that our ancestors, even though our ancestors would go to war, they still didn't go to war out of hatred. It was a need of survival so that the people may live. It wasn't out of hatred or anger. It was so that the people may live and the love of your people and the land that you are on. This is why when the spokesperson for Wet'suwet'en here, the standoff, when she's on camera in news bits talking, you don't see her with war paint on. War paint was when we were actually at war. We were out to, that was it. It was war. It's not a standoff. It's not a protest, so to speak, or a standing up of sovereign nations, standing up for the right to maintain sovereignty over the lands that they have been there for tens of thousands of years before colonizers even knew that the world was flat, or knew that found out that the world wasn't flat. They still thought the world was flat, and that the end of the sea line was where the world dropped off. Till, and a lot of that, like, these are things that we learn, right? Like, Pacific Islanders were very much so wanted by the colonizers for traversing the seas. They were the ones that had all the, technical stuff to make sure, oh yeah, this is where we're going. This is how we steer the ship this way. That's always been how it's been, as much as they hate to admit it. But this is the reality, right? So these are things that we have to look at. We can't just always hate, Thanksgiving, we can't just do that all the time. We have to remember that our people had our own Thanksgiving ceremonies that it was appropriated from by colonizers. And that we must reclaim those ceremonies for ourselves and our people and our future generations to be able to carry it on and honor and respect our ancestors so that the people may live. And this is coming from me, someone who lived through the 60s scoop, where I was stolen as a baby, as an infant, placed into foster care where they took such poor care of me. I caught a severe case of pneumonia that almost completely killed me, but it completely damaged and destroyed my lungs. And then sold to Europeans, an Icelandic family that literally beat me, raped me, tortured me, and abused me till I was 13. And then when I stood up, I ended up spending 5 years in jail because their Christian ass was more important than my heathen Indigenous ass. And yeah, it took me a long time to heal from that. Healing doesn't come in one day. Changing your pattern of thoughts and healing the harm that you live through doesn't happen overnight. And Silver Spook says it all the time. I am always going to be half stormtrooper. It takes a long time to decolonize my mindset, to heal. It's not going to happen just overnight. You people have spent lifetimes, years, being conditioned to think that way. We are losing our ancestors when we keep, and our culture and our way of life, when we keep going along with what colonizers are doing the same thing, just repeating it, but with different wording. It's the same. The anger, the violence, the hatred, it's all the same. It's all that same cycle that colonizers use all the time. We are not colonized. We are not them. We come from a much better life. That they literally wrote, Marx, Kropotkin, Engels, all of them wrote books about our indigenous way of life because it was far superior than theirs. And that's the truth. These things we literally have to take and constantly remind ourselves and think on all the time and think about and work towards healing. How can you raise children, or how can you raise your nieces and nephews? Always on hate. That's no love. That's no world for them to live in. There's no future there for them. They'll either end up in jails, institutions, or dead. That's not what we want for any of our people. I know myself in my streams, I have been slowly introducing traditional way of life of Indigenous people as much as I can, so that way people don't get over, how do I put it? Overbooked or over, you know what I mean? Overwhelmed with all the knowledge, because you cannot learn tens of thousands of years of knowledge in one day. It takes time. We,
Yeah.
you know,
Definitely, yeah.
I may leave this borrowed robe and take on the next journey without knowing every single thing about our people's way of life and history. We're always constantly learning till the day, from the day we're born to the day we die. That never changes. That's a constant. But the reality begins within. You don't have to live in a world that is owned and ran and controlled by colonizer mindset. You can change that. You can heal from that. You can grow. You can honor the ancestors and rise up rather than fall down. And that doesn't mean that we stand there peacefully when we're being, you know, shot at or beaten or whatever. No, our ancestors protected themselves too, but they didn't come with malice. They didn't come with anger, rage, or hatred. They came out of love, and because they wanted to make sure that the people lived, and that for the next generations, they were still here. This is why we're still here today, because our ancestors knew that they needed to make sure that the people will live on and still be here. And to make sure that we have a proud and very loving and kind and compassionate and awesome history and lineage to give us strength and hope within in this very day and age. This is why a lot of people, you'll hear them say, that traditional way and stuff, that's for the elders. I can go and learn that later. You hear it all the time. But no, these very ways of life still help today. They still have value. They still have worth. They still work today just as much as they did back then. It's still there. There's a reason why psychologists around the world state that indigenous spiritual way of life is the highest form of psychology. Still to this day, they state indigenous way of life, spiritual way of life, is the highest form of psychology. Because otherwise, we're stuck with constantly living in PTSD, shame, guilt, anger, rage, hurt, and harm. And then we carry in that and push that onto others, and especially around those that we love the most and we care for the most. It goes out that way. Rather than healing and showing the love and compassion and understanding for each other as human beings. Not what your skin color is or how much percentage you are. No. That has never been in question in any indigenous. Like prime examples we can use, like Crazy Horse was a light-skinned native. He looked whiter than white, almost just like all the colonizers. Yet there is no outside DNA from any European bloodline in his bloodline at all. None. That was before first contact ever with settlers, European settlers. So these are things that we have to look at. We have to look at starting to honor and respect our traditional ways in life of our ancestors and how we have always done. We cannot always be focusing on all the negativity. We can't. It leads us down too much of a dark road that we may never come back from. We have to start bringing forth and honoring our ancestors in the way in which we lived our lives and they lived their lives. And carrying that on for the next generations coming forward so that they can have that strength. They can have that love and compassion in their heart. If we are too damaged, okay, we don't have to pass that on to the next generation. We can teach them to be better. We can show them, here, these are our ancestors' way of life. This is what we do. This has been in our people's way of life for generations, tens of thousands of years. We must also push this forward so that the people may live and that it will always be here. It won't be eliminated. It won't be erased. It will always be here. And it will not be forgotten. I'm sorry I went on a rant.
No, it's all good. That's exactly that's what we started the stream for. To get the lawsuit.
That's all we need.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Saber,
Yeah,
I know you got to go probably soon, so if you wanna, let us know.
Yeah, cool. So I am probably gonna have to hop out, unfortunately. But yeah, no, I definitely appreciate. I feel like whenever I speak to Lost Sioux or listen to the streams, it always just brings me to a place of like peace. Honestly, I'm just like, all right. So yeah, I appreciate that. So I definitely appreciate that. Sure. And yeah, no. So it's definitely like fun speaking to everyone. I appreciate you inviting me on Silver Spook as always, and Akemi, it's nice meeting you as well. Yeah, so yeah, if anyone wants to find me, hit me up anywhere. Saber or Sabernetics on YouTube and Twitter. I make video essays and stuff like that. Also launched a new channel for a collective of Black leftists where we have just some podcasts on there. a few of them are on. One of them we spoke about the sort of history and sort of current situation in Haiti. The other one we spoke about settler colonialism in Israel and Palestine, and then we also started off a new like One Piece podcast as well. It's like an anime thing. If anyone's interested in that, so I appreciate the invite, as I said, but I hope you all enjoy the rest of your stream, and I will probably catch the VOD and listen to the rest at some point as well. So
yeah. Thanks so much for being on, Saber. All right.
All right. Peace. Take care, everyone.
Aloha. Cool. Anyways, everybody should definitely follow Saber. I'll just, one more thing I'll say is, the only books that I have read this year, the only books I've read this year are recommendations from Saber, basically. So one of them was The Deep. Yeah, I bring this up fairly frequently, and I've read other stuff, but not all the way through. But yeah, definitely follow Saber. Check this out. Saber had to go a little early. Also, Holly, where was Shaw's thing? Shaw, unfortunately, is having some. I don't know if the.
I DM'd it to you on Discord.
Okay, Shaw's still having some phone problems. So shoots. Oops. What am I doing? Shaw. Sorry about that. Shaw's still having some phone problems. So we might have to. Shaw might get a little a video or something that is Shaw's statement. What she might have said a little bit, because she can't connect to the Discord for some reason. So I don't know if it's. I'm gonna chalk it up to being one of the as Shaw's boss, Dallas Goldtooth, who is also on Reservation Dogs, which you should all watch if you haven't seen it yet. Dallas Goldtooth said it's easy to be a warrior. It's harder to be a warrior with dignity. And so Shaw, being a warrior with dignity, the rage and trauma-filled stormtroopers that have taken Shaw's phone repeatedly, maybe perhaps have messed with the internet connection. That's what I want to say it is, but who knows? But importantly, we want to get something from Shaw, so I'm gonna get that really quick. Let me see if I can get that up on this. Oh crap. Okay. You DM'd it? You DM'd it to me? Okay. 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 Give me. Okay. One moment here. Discord. You sent it to me on Discord? I don't see it, unfortunately. Okay. Anyways.
Oh, sorry. I had to get something to drink and use the wash on my back.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No problem.
Back.
Sorry, I'm sorry about that. Anyways, Akemi, why don't you tell us what are you doing for this holiday season, if you feel like to remember that, as Sue was saying, to continue. Actually, I had something else I wanted to say, but I want to get this from Shaw. Is it just a statement?
Yeah, it's a picture. It's in your Twitter.
Okay. I got the thing from Sean. Okay, so this is what Shaw wanted to say. Shaw wanted to say the Thanksgiving story buries the major cause of King Philip's War, the relentless seizure of Indian land. It also covers up the consequence. The war split Wampanoags as well as every other native group, and ended the indigenous resistance broken, and the colonists giving thanks. That's from Philip Deloria, The Invention of Thanksgiving, November 25th, 2019. In solidarity always, Pacifica Rising. Because Shaw is, for those of us who don't know, Shaw is indigenous Palauan descent. Palau is another one of our relatives in the Pacific Islands, in the Pacific Ocean, in Micronesia. Currently also, like Okinawa and Hawaii, having unwanted U.S. military bases currently being built all over, like growing more Star Destroyer launching ports, and more and more Captain Phasmas keep showing up in the Pacific. It's really don't like this, so that's why I try to do everything to keep an eye on this and try to spotlight all of this. And we really are all tied together. We are all tied together from all the way to the West Pacific, off the coast of Taiwan, with Asia at Pacific, to Hawaii, Palau, you know, the RCM, the settlers in Canada and their police against the indigenous people's unceded territory, Hawaii's unceded territory here on Mauna Kea, like where they bomb on top of my mountain 30 miles and they wake me up at night. I can't tell if it's thunder or if it's bombing sometimes. They're practicing to go bomb Afghanistan or Iraq or Vietnam or somewhere. We are all tied together in trying to fight this system with as much peace as Lasu is correct, very well powerfully saying, with come to it not with anger. Sometimes I know I get a little bit riled up on my streams, but it's always from a place of love and a place of peace, and because I want us all to survive, even the people who want to see us all not survive, because at the end of the day, these are people that, to my mind, have simply not recovered. There was one point in the deep Europe's deep past that they were not colonizers. There were people there that were living in peace and living in multi-generational thinking, I think, and from what I've looked into, and they have been deeply traumatized from what is called Britain today. Piccadilly Circus is really an artifact to their own trauma. It's a monolith of deep Euro settler colonization. I would argue that they have not recovered. It is a lesson for us, right? Everyone, all of us, Asian, Pacific Islander, African, and of the Turtle Island, or Abya as they call it down in South Turtle Island. For all of our people, we can all become. We are all still half stormtrooper. We can all still become the continuers of our trauma 1,000 years from now, in the way that the British have continued to fail to heal from that trauma. The Spanish, the British, the French, and so we have to break that cycle. We have to not re-trauma in our own families, right? As Lasso was saying, in our own loved ones. And here's something I want to bring this one thing up really quick, because just to show you what I mean by this. These are 3 separate images from 3 separate struggles. But what you're gonna see something when we talk about re-traumatizing ourselves. This is from a struggle on Mauna Kea. This is Kaleko Akael being arrested, one of our indigenous Hawaiian activists that has been arrested dozens of times. He was arrested for speaking Hawaiian language in 2018 in a Hawaii state court of law. He was arrested and taken to jail for speaking Hawaiian in Hawaii 3 years ago. So Hawaiian is still illegal here. And Kaleko Kaeo, if you see who's arresting him, it is a police officer. He's a Native Hawaiian police officer, right? So members of my family are in the United States military. I bring this up a lot. Members of my aunts and uncles, they are rich capitalists. They have huge millions of dollars of stock. I have one in Oregon that married one of the richest Republicans in the United States, personally responsible for opening Canada and the Arctic for drilling. And she is Native Hawaiian, and she spits on brown people. It makes me so disgusted. Even my father was disgusted. And so importantly, this is the beginning. If we don't undo this, right, ourselves joining in, becoming full stormtroopers and going, I just want a cut of capitalism in America and and what the colonization process can give to me. I want to be the in-house servant of the empire rather than just the one getting beaten down in the field. These guys could be cousins, right? And then here's another one. That's in Hawaii. Warriors of the Rainbow. This is that movie I was talking about. I was trying to find a video. Here's another image from you can't really see it, but oh shoot, I can't. I'm trying to find a good one, but this is in Taiwan. Again, this is our Austronesian relatives in Taiwan, and members of this tribe. I'm trying to find one, but one of the members of this tribe is their striped clothing is the traditional Hakka indigenous people's clothing of Taiwan, and one of them becomes a police officer and is beating the other, and joins the Japanese Imperial military, gets more money, gets a nicer house. Renounces his indigenous Hakka name, takes on a Japanese ancestor, but he also hates himself for much of his life. And that's a kind of self-trauma that is, I did this to myself because I was forced to try to become basically a financial Wall Street guy, and I couldn't do that. There's another version of Silver Spook that still hates myself, and I'm in New York something. So anyway, and one final one. Where's the last one? Okay, yeah, and this is oh crap. Okay, I lost it. This is from the this is the Wet'suwet'en struggle. The Unistolten, as we were kind of talking about, Unistolten camp. Their account has been deleted from Twitter. They have been shadow banned multiple times. Nobody wants anybody knowing about this. But at the actual arrests, look at who is doing the arresting in so-called Canada. Look very closely at some of the people. Content warning. This is a little bit, but I'm just gonna get to the picture. There's one where you can see what I'm talking about here. Shoot, where is it?
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
If I may.
Yeah.
So just so that people seeing this understand, the detachment that is the area that it supposedly has jurisdiction in somewhat is the Smithers RCMP. Those officers are our Surrey RCMP officers moonlighting out of their jurisdiction. They have no jurisdiction there. They're not even supposed to be wearing those uniforms because they're moonlighting. They're being paid by the CGL company to do this. Yeah. They are not there as law enforcement officers trying to enforce a court order. Because I could walk down the street, go to a notary of public, and have the same injunction. It's the same thing when landlords give you a notice of eviction notice. They go to a notary of republic so that they can use it later in a court of law. But a court of law takes time. It takes months to years to get any decision. The Supreme Court of Canada already said to the Smithers RCMP and CGL to get the hell out of there. That's the Supreme Court of Canada. That's why the Smithers detachment is not in that group, in any of it. It's all the Surrey RCMP. And they're not even in their jurisdiction. So they're committing a criminal act right here on your very own eyes and wearing cop uniforms, police uniforms, to make you think they're doing things legally when they're not. They're violating their own laws.
Yep. Colonizers violating.
Sorry, go ahead, bro.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Anyways, I'll just finish that. It just it took a little longer than I wanted, but I mean, my main point is, and I lost the image, but similar to Hawaii, where we're facing. I often say the United States doesn't have any laws. The West doesn't. It's all barbarism with legal theater. A lot of the time, they say they're going to do one thing. They break their own laws. They're violating the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, number one, and then number two, their own injunctions, which are, it'd be like if China passed a law that said there can be no golf courses in California and started building homeless shelters, because that's what they're doing in Hong Kong and China, by the way. They're building for people who don't have houses. They're just building on people's golf courses. I'm thinking about talking to CEO. Hey, can we get those in Hawaii? Just build for the homeless Hawaiians that are 4 times more likely to be homeless. Can we just get homeless shelters built? Just get housing built on rich people's golf courses, like Mark Zuckerberg, like the guy who owns this platform that we're streaming from, billionaires. Can we get housing built? Because that's what they're doing anyways. But it would be like if China passed a law that says you must no more golf courses. Every golf course must have like thousands of units of affordable free housing, right? And then China just started building in California, right? What would have happened? Well, it'd be a war, because the West doesn't tolerate anyone touching any of their nice things, right? But that's the equivalent of passing a law in Canada or in and then enforcing it on the sovereign unceded territory of any of these sovereign tribes. That's what so when they're entering onto your territory, and that includes on Mauna Kea. We're supposed to have sovereignty on Mauna Kea. Native Hawaiians are supposed to have control, even under the bogus illegitimate legal fiction of the state of Hawaii, which the United Nations has literally said Hawaii is an illegal occupation based on a fraudulent annexation and illegal military occupation, and the United States government and its military must immediately withdraw and defer to the Native Hawaiian people's sovereign government. That's the United Nations High Commissioner on Human Rights Order. You can look this up, but these are just gangsters. The United States, Canada, Britain, France, all these Western countries, these are run by oligarchs. They're just cartels with nicer suits and more legitimacy because they literally run the entire country, and they have capitals like Ottawa and DC to make it look all legit. It is not legitimate, and they violate their own laws so many ways. And finally, so back to this point, what I wanted to say was that so many of the police, the colonizers' number one way to destroy, primary way to destroy the people is to try to buy them off and to try to get the indigenous people to betray their own by becoming the police, by becoming even their own social workers that do the terrible things that I describe in Neofeud and Sioux talks about all the time, and to collaborate with the colonizer to break them, to humiliate themselves, to break their spirit, to break our spirit. And so that's why I often say, like, if you're going to do anything, okay, do anything other than become a U.S. police. The U.S. military is about going to other people's sovereign nations and violating them, whatever you think of them. The United States military in particular, the Vietnam is something else, but that's very important. That's kicking colonizers out, not going to other people's countries and ripping their resources and people out. But if you are in the U.S. military immediately, or the Canadian for that matter, or the Australian for that matter, please consider not collaborating with genocide, with the continuation of this process. It will harm you economically in places like the United States, but these are choices that many of the people that are on Mauna Kea make these difficult choices. Our friend Positive Synergy, who is another member of the Silver Spook Hui, was repeatedly approached and has family like me that are in the United States military and police that are Native Hawaiian, harming ourselves and our culture. And anyway, so that's why we have to not become, centuries from now, the new new unhealed people, the new British and French, by repeating this trauma. And we have to move, as Sioux said, get past it. Anyways, I'm just kind of repeating what you said. So yeah.
all good.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm missing the video chat. Where's my video? Oh crap.
I think sometimes it helps when people hear it just not from one person but others as well. To hear that same sentiment from other people, that we have to stop the violence, hatred, and harm, even amongst, and especially amongst ourselves, and start working towards the healing and life and love of all of us, our relatives, and joining together and standing together. These people in Wet'suwet'en, they're not even doing violent actions to the RCMP, even though it's their own land and it's unceded territory. They have every right to meet the RCMP with the equal amount of force to protect their lands, but they're not doing that. They're doing things peacefully, with love, not hatred and harm. I mean, sure, like I said, it's unceded territory, which means Canada has no claim or control over it. It doesn't belong to Canada. It was never signed in a treaty. It was never handed over or sold to any of the colonizers of Canada. It's still Wet'suwet'en land, rightfully so, by both Canadian law and world law. They can easily pick up arms and defend themselves legally, but they choose to stand there in peace. and in defiance of tyranny. They even have Mohawks out there, Mohawk warriors out there, who could very easily be bringing forth all kinds of military supplies, but they chose not to. This is what we talk about. Yes, Mesh. Warriors from other nations are there too. Yes. This is what we're always looking at. This is what we're always talking about. You cannot always come from anger, rage, violence to do harm. You have to learn to heal. That doesn't mean that our ancestors didn't defend themselves either. We already know that. Colonizers could not beat any of the places that they colonized fairly in a fair war. They had to use disease and starvation to win. They didn't win just by going, oh yeah, look, we beat you in a war. No, you didn't. And many different indigenous people around the world have that history of no, like even Hawaii. What did they do? They cheated the queen in Hawaii out of her crown and port and lands. Silver Spook talks about it all the time. What did they do in North America? They killed off the buffalo to almost extinction, and they handed out disease-ridden blankets. And then they would wait for the warriors to be out hunting and go in and attack the villages and rape and murder the women, children, and elderly and mutilate them. This is a well-known historical fact. We see it with Wounded Knee, Sand Creek Massacre. All these things are historical facts. All throughout indigenous lands throughout the world. Not just in North America, in South America, Central, the Pacific Islands, Africa, New Zealand, Australia, and even in some parts of Asia. The same thing. It's a colonizer mentality. The same tactics were used. These are things that we have to, yes, it's important to remember them, but we have to heal from them. There was a reason why they feared our ancestors so much when they would go into war against us. There was a reason why they did everything in their power to get rid of our traditional way of life, our spiritual way of life. There was a reason why. It wasn't because they wanted to make it more easier to assimilate us. It was because we scared them shitless. Just say it.
Yep. I mean, they literally said, I think the quote unquote Indians are communist, and we cannot coexist with these people. And one of these, it's still viewed that way. It's really like, as a Twin Rabbits, another video that you should definitely check out if you have a second. Yeah, probably a lot of people have, but if you haven't, all of Twin Rabbits videos, but Stolen Anarchy, which is deals with the inspiration of a lot of what the Western left, anarchism, socialism, communism, etc. Marx, Kropotkin, a lot of these people were inspired.
Oh,
Go, yeah.
If I, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Kola. Like I said, we're able to still fight back, whether peacefully or doing little things of like setting fires to vehicles or setting a train track on fire to stop the flow and to stop and shut down Canada or wherever the country you are. This isn't done out of anger and hatred. This is done out of love, loyalty, and respect and honor and commitment. Very big different way of looking at things. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with standing up and shutting down a whole country. You know, sometimes when you have a bad guest, you got to hit them over the head with over the nose with a newspaper to get them to wake up and realize they're being a bad guest.
Yep. I'm gonna use that all the Thanksgiving guests are gonna get that newspaper to their nose.
But it is like that. It's like even the Mohawk warriors in the Oka crisis. You see the elders pulling aside the young warriors that were getting too violent, that were getting too angry, telling them to go walk it off, calm down. That's not what we're doing here. Yet they were armed to the teeth. They were standing up against the Quebec and Ontario police. Then they were standing up against the Canadian Army. But this is the way of our people. Like I said, it's just because we come from love and peace and stuff doesn't mean we don't defend ourselves either. It doesn't mean that we're not capable of doing things like that. We are. It's usually the last resort is violence, not the first. That's the difference. We are not a monolith. We are not the enemy that we're portrayed to be by Hollywood and other colonial capitalist organizations and cohorts. We are not. And I think sometimes even our own people forget that we are not these things. And we hear sometimes, even I catch myself sometimes going, yeah, I'm a savage. You want me to be a savage? I'll show you what a savage is. I forget myself because I get too caught up into colonialism thinking that suckers you in to thinking less than who you truly are. That's the things that we're constantly faced with to this day.
Yep. Anyways, I should probably throw it to, that's totally what we have to, the warriors that we have to try to be, warriors of the land, as I think I made a song named that. But anyways, Akemi, yeah, no, it's
I do have two things that came to mind.
Yeah, go. We haven't heard from you.
So I learned about the medicine wheel from watching a stream that Lassie did way back in like September. And I looked more into it because I was very interested because I was going through a really rough patch in my life, and often, but comes in waves. And so I looked more into it, and I found some like webinars that some groups and sometimes academically related, sometimes not. But this one was called, and I'll link this in probably Silver Spooks and maybe Lost News Discords later. It's called Mental Health Forum, Indigenous Populations and Mental Health from Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. And there was one part in particular, also when you were talking about, I think you were talking about like the buffalo and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I'm trying to read my own notes, but I have like historical trauma and settler colonialism, and that historically traumatic events and settler colonialism are both designed to disrupt our ability to fulfill our original instructions. And it's a disruption of relational ways of being through land, culture, and language. And I have a quote that says, when General Sheridan said the best way to kill the Lakota is to kill the buffalo, he wasn't talking about cutting off just their food supply. He was talking about cutting off their ability to fulfill their original teachings that their ancestors had taught them. It was actually a deep spiritual assault, just as much as it was a cutoff of the need of food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because our whole Lakota or Sioux Nation's whole entire way of life was surrounded by and through and with the buffalo. everything. It all works hand in hand.
And then another thing that came to mind was there's a non-binary scholar named Alok, whose last name escapes me, but if you look them up, you'll probably find them. And this was from, they were featured on a podcast called the Man Enough Podcast. This was the only episode I listened to it. But the title of it is Alok, the Urgent Need for Compassion. And in one part, they're talking about how, I'll just read the quote that I have highlighted. Or I'll read a little bit before. Because someone was saying, someone was asking, how, this struggle for, trans and non-binary people, one of the co-podcast anchor people were saying that the feeling to, fight for them doesn't come as naturally for them. And he was wondering, why is that, and, how, help me help you type of thing. And Alok said, the reason you don't fight for me is because you're not fighting for yourself fully. And any movement that's trying to emancipate men from the shackles of heteropatriarchy or emancipate women from traditional gender ideology has to have trans and non-binary people at the forefront, because we're actually the most honest. We're tracing the root. Where did these ideas of manhood and womanhood come from? They come from a binary structure. And so that's why people like me, who are visibly gender nonconforming, are both feminine and masculine and none of the above. We experience the brunt of all these collective fantasies that were created that are killing other people that are also killing us. It just looks different. And so one of the things I try to do in my work is say, don't show up for me because you want to protect me or you want to help me. I don't need your help. I have an unshakable and irrevocable sense of who I am because I am divine. I come from people who were exterminated and targeted by colonists because the gender binary, and we can get into this, was superimposed on Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color by European colonists. And the reason that they targeted us is because they knew our power, right? So the reason there's so much animus against me is because of my power. I don't need to be legitimized. I don't have anything to prove. What I want us to rephrase the conversation to is, are you ready to heal? And I don't think the majority of people are ready to heal. And that's why they repress us as trans and gender variant people, because they've done this violence to themselves first.
Yep. I can definitely, I mean, I've talked about this on the streams as well, which is that, the number one people that were repressed in still to this day, even in Hawaii, there's Kumuhina. I think you brought that up a little bit ago. But for those who don't know, just on another, less, on the topic of trans, non-binary, two-spirit, and straight people in indigenous cultures, Kumuhina is somebody who has been central to the struggle in Hawaii. Trying to get Kumuhina has been central to the struggle against colonization in Hawaii. Kumuhina is Mahu. Some people, I've talked a bit about that on several streams, but it is not the same thing as the two-spirit, as it's known in some Turtle Island indigenous cultures. It is not the same as, it doesn't quite mean, trans or non-binary specifically in English. In fact, there was a recent panel of indigenous Pacific peoples, decolonization and queer identity. And one of the, I think it was a Maori non-binary person who said, I don't fit into LGBTQ plus, or I don't fit into any of those, because our Maori, the indigenous people of what's called New Zealand, or Aotearoa to them, our understanding of gender doesn't really there aren't really words that mean these things, gay, straight, trans, etc., lesbian. So she invented her own word. It's like MMBI something. It's basically all the different ways of identifying gender and orientation. And Mahu for Native Hawaiians is similar in the sense it doesn't directly. I mean, this is from Adam Kiave. I often bring Adam as a historian, Filipino and Hawaiian. So he's also Asian and Pacific Islander, or Southeast Asian and Pacific Islander. Filipino and Hawaiian history are very much tied together, and as well as with U.S. imperialism and colonialism. And Mahu resistance challenging colonial structures of power and gender goes specifically into this. The term mahu is familiar to anyone who grew up in Hawaii. When I was in elementary school, this is a little bit from Adam. My older brother asked what a mahu was. I asked my older brother what a mahu was, and he responded, "Dakain." Dakain is like a Hawaiian pidgin placeholder. It just means like the thing. You know when you see one. A mahu could be defined in various ways, including a person of a third gender, non-binary, queer, a person that is neither heterosexual nor cisgender, homosexual, transgender, a person who is gender transcendent, like the bisu of Indonesia, and/or a person that feels between male and female. It also holds the same meaning in tradition in Tahiti and other places in Polynesia. And anyways, there's a long story about the history of Kaomi, who was a mahu Hawaiian in the 1800s who stood against the Christian cis heteronormative patriarchy in Hawaii, which they wanted to abolish. Also, there were very strong matriarchal or gender equality, if not matriarchal sort of societies in Hawaii and much of the Pacific, and that was something that the Christian colonizers wanted to annihilate, and even more so in a lot of ways these people who are between the genders and who are attacked for being sodomite, etc., etc. And Kami was one of the people that led the carrying forward the Hawaiian culture in this early time of the missionaries trying to stamp it out and institute this Christian, quote unquote, Christian, good civilized values. To be civilized meant to be Christian, meant to be Western, meant to speak English or Spanish or French or one of these colonizer languages like we're talking about. And so, and to this day, Kumuhina remains a very important figure as a champion and a fighter for Hawaiian culture, and also in the fight on Mauna Kea, like many people, right, we're not there at the very beginning, but Kumuhina was there from the start for fighting for the Mauna, led the highway. Speaking of economic and cultural, indigenous-led socialist movements, right? There's a lot to talk about now in the colonizer Western world about how we have to get away from capitalism to socialism, and it was in fact Kumuhina that led the first the shutdowns of highways from the Honolulu International. This is Kumuhina on stream from Honolulu International Airport to Waikiki, which represents tens of billions of dollars. I would argue the majority of Hawaii's, colonizer economy, which is literally cultural appropriation and selling like cheap tchotchkes, all of Hawaiian culture in, the plastic cellophane lei hula dances for $7 an hour as the rich, disproportionately white capitalist owners of Waikiki, Turtle Bay, these resorts, right, make money profiting from our own humiliation of our own culture. That's part of the destruction of Hawaiianness, is to do fake versions of your own culture and to try to just pay your rent, which is, the most expensive in the United States for how much you make. Anyway, so Kumuhina led the shutdown of the highway to stop the tour buses. That was a huge, a blow to the tourism. They really freaked out. All of the airlines, the big hotel resort owners, they all freaked out. And Kumuhina led that. Kumuhina also led a lot of the struggles, getting mass arrested. Was there for, also visited the Mauna as well, and has always been a kind of a leader, even in the hard times, when it was less, and it still is hard to be Hawaiian in Hawaii. You can still get arrested for being Hawaiian. And so it's, the people who really lead the struggles are often the, for very important reason, historically and today, in indigenous resistance, mahu to spirit, what's called queer, but it really means something else. It's approximation of what it is to us as Native Hawaiians, etc. And it's important that we remember that, and also it's important to remember, as part of I will change presentations on the stream, I will identify by he or they, and part of that is because I just feel like doing that because I used to play in glam rock bands and I like to do that. But also, it's I'm gonna make my whole, when I'm done with Neofeud 2, I got some time. I'll make this virtual indigenous, decolonial goth metal band or something, and I'm just gonna do music for in a year or something, But part of it's that, and part of it is also recapturing of the Hawaiians didn't identify gender as he you're he or you're she, and that's defined by what's in your pants. And these major fights happening right now, you know, against with people like the trans people, especially trans women of color, being disproportionately targeted for violence and killed at the highest rates. These fights against in whether U.S., Britain, J.K. Rowling jumping in on this kind of gross attack on, you know, our non-cis straight relatives, and Indigenous, you know, like Hawaiians, we didn't have a conception of, you know, you loved who you love. Like, you know, as I often bring up, when you loved someone, romantically or asexually, etc., you know, however you did, that wasn't something that defined everything about you, and definitely didn't have a negative stigma. We had what's called aikane relationships. That's you know, we identified like, okay, this is you know, same quote unquote sex relationship, but it was, you could do that, and then you could love somebody you know, you could be a kane, or a you know, basically a man, or loving quote unquote wahine, or you could be somewhere in between. You could be mahu, loving one or the other, but that didn't define who you were, and your gender was fluid. You weren't like nailed to the gender, and then coming out as, there weren't like coming out parties, because it wasn't you know, like in colonizer culture, like American, you know, British, there's this terror, there's this existential dread, right? Oh my goodness, what's going to happen when I come out to my parents? Will they disown me? Will they like, because they're Christian, will they like kick me out of the house? Right? That is like inconceivable in traditional Hawaiian culture. There was not dread, there was not like fear of being ostracized, because people of whatever gender were accepted, and you could change, you know, gender fluidity was as you could change gender like changing clothes. In fact, there was not even a pronoun, because people talk about, you know, we have to like use, you know, and it is important. I'm glad, you know, we get, I know Akemi is they, them, but I apologize, but you know, I forget, but you know, but this concept of like, we have to use our pronouns and give them first, and it is a good thing to do to like normalize, right? Just normalize this, you know, people being able to identify the way that they want to identify. But in Hawaiian culture, there is not even a pronoun for man, woman, male, female, and for it. There's ya. There's like it's like ia, you know. Similar in Filipino, similar in Indonesian. As I said earlier, like the Taiwan indigenous people, the Hakka people, and the Austronesian peoples, we all have similar. We have a very similar language, which doesn't even identify a different pronoun for he, she, and it. It's just one pronoun. So, you know, anyways, that reflects, like, that's in the language. You can see kind of the way that this these conceptions of who is higher, lower, who counts as a person, who doesn't count, right? You know, that's part of it kind of goes back to, you know, it's a linguistic forensics, digging through the centuries to see how Hawaiians actually were. That's reflected still to this day. They've stamped much out of who we were, and part of it is we didn't have a written language. So a lot of this wasn't written down, but they stamped a lot out. But it's still within the language itself. You can see that these hierarchies and race as well were not. They were just not. They were not part of the culture. Anyways, I've been going on for too long. Sorry, Akemi.
It's okay. That did remind me that in Breeding Sweetgrass, which is another book that I'm like, I've been reading for a while, and I'm like in the middle of it. But anyways, in the beginning, there was like a little asterisk with at the bottom, and the passage that it's from is, I don't know. Well, it's as if we can see the world we want to live in just over time's horizon. The question is, how do we get there? It's a question familiar to Sweetgrass, unable to leave one place and travel to a better one by sea. Ki relies on humans to carry rhizomes, the ones who can easily cross distance and boundaries, who know that whatever we wish to see on the other side of the narrows of this ecological and cultural crisis, we must pass lovingly from hand to hand. And Ki is a pronoun used to signify a living being of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, Ki in what language?
I'm not sure what language. It might be Potawatomi. Doesn't specify in the beginning, but the writer, I believe, is Potawatomi Robin Wall Kimmerer.
Mm.
Yeah, and they also talked about later in the book. They talked about the word for, I think, a type of mushroom. I don't have the part of it like tagged or whatever, but they were talking about they learned the word from like the scientific word for mushroom, something like that, in their science class. But the origins of that word were indigenous, and then they learned that that word also means to like rise mysteriously like overnight. But it can be used to refer to like mushrooms that just pop up overnight, or could be used to refer to something else that pops up in the night sometimes. And they mentioned also how like their language is very difficult sometimes because so many things that are like sound very close can mean completely different things, or sometimes the same word can mean completely different things. But it's like meant to be that way because it's meant to be like a fun language to be able to joke around in and be fun. And that's another thing that another aspect that we lose when we lose languages. Always bringing it back to languages.
It's the same thing, like just to like many different tribes on Turtle Island in the main, or what would be called classified or whatever as the mainland. Two-spirited didn't necessarily mean LGBTQ plus. It was a part of it, but it didn't necessarily and solely mean that. Many different indigenous languages still don't have all the pronoun in their wording, in their actual dialect, in their conversation, because people were seen as human beings. They weren't considered to be in boxes or had to check any box, because sexuality and stuff was fluid. It was on a spectrum. It was fluid through it. And you would watch your children grow up and the whole community would see. So if you were a two-spirited, they would know. And you weren't shamed or shunned or anything. It was just, no, okay, this is who you are. Your path towards your life and what you choose to live was between you and the Creator. Your family's and relatives' job was to ensure that they took good care of you while you were growing up so that you could become the person that you were supposed to be, not what someone else decides for you. And I say that all the time. My sexuality is up to me to decide. It's not up to anyone else. No one has the right to tell me, oh, I must fit in this box or that box, or tell me that I'm confused about my sexuality. I know who the fuck I am. I know my sexuality. I know where I stand in life. I know my path. I'm not lost, even though my name is Sioux. And it's the same thing, like when I'm echoing what I'm echoing is the words from the smokehouse mothers and grandmothers and the clan mothers in Wet'suwet'en territory that are not asking for a full-out war. They're asking for solidarity and support. They're not asking for a full-on war. And these are the words that they've spoken. So these are the words that I will do my best to help uplift what it is that they want. I'm not a Wet'suwet'en. I'm a Sioux. My job is to support them in that, not try to add on extras. That's how I have always been. And these are things that we look at, right? Like, two-spirited could be you were born in half a womb, or that you were born dead. And the Holy Spirit, so to speak, using the English terminology for it, as close as possible, I guess you could say, blew a second breath of life in you. Well, now you walk in both the world of the dead and the living, two-spirited. You were black and indigenous. Oh, you have two worlds. You were white and indigenous. Well, you have two worlds that you live in, two-spirited. It did not necessarily mean one physical aspect. There's 4 aspects of us: our mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical. It's not pigeonholed. And that's not to say that Europeans with their LGBTQ plus and everything is not illegitimate. No, it's legitimate for them. Yeah. Yeah, that's good for them. Our way of life is good for us. But each individual has their own choice in what they choose. But don't chastise your relatives when they choose to live in accordance with their traditional way of life, because they don't agree with outside things. That's seriously things we have to look at every single day. This is what we talk about when we talk about healing and stopping violence, stopping the spread of violence, abuse, and harm. Because we attack each other. And that's what they want, us attacking each other. They want us harming each other. That's what they want. Because then they don't have to face us. They don't have to deal with the things they've done to us. They can just brush it off. Look at it. They're too busy fighting each other. Well, I guess we did our job really well. These are the things that we look at every single bloody day. We see it all around. These are things that we need to work on healing and coming correctly.
Yep, Ho'oponopono. It means yep. Pono in Hawaiian is Ho'opono is righteousness or justice, and so Ho'oponopono means to make right and to heal from. And it's also a process of community. What is sometimes described in stormtrooper languages as restorative justice, as opposed to carceral punitive. And so Ho'oponopono means to make right in the community, but it does require the community has to be healed or majority healed to begin that process. And so if I myself as part of the Silver Spook Hui, what we try to do here physically and then also digitally, we're not healed, then we cannot heal anyone. We can only, we can only punch on, as people say don't punch down, but you can also punch into the future. You can punch on into your children and you punch forward, and we have to, we have to try our best, because we have 2 kids, Holly and I. We have to do our best, because we can only be who we are, but we have to do our best to not continue what my parents, for whatever reasons, and my parents' generation have failed to undo, because it was hard. The money was too good it was just, there was too much stigma to be full Hawaiian and celebrate who you are. My mom still doesn't, she straightens her hair because to her it's still ugly, and the school that she teaches for, which is a Catholic school, says that she's ugly for being Hawaiian, basically. So she's from a poor area, her car is ugly, her hair is ugly. My dad, anyway, yeah, I should have. I just gonna get depressing. But importantly, we just have to be better. And I have to say this because I know Holly said it's we're getting close to the it's 6 o'clock. I didn't have a hard time limit for this, but I know everybody has things they needed to do and to go to. I was thinking, I'm probably gonna cut the official panel off, and then I might restart. But we should probably wrap the actual formal panel up, and then we can have after party. If you want to stick around, you can stick around, and I'm gonna play some music or something. I'm supposed to play at least one song for. I learned an indigenous Uchinanchu song, partially inspired by Akemi, our conversations and being on these panels, and also because I have Japanese, I have both Euro Imperial and Japanese Imperial colonizers in my ancestry, and I have to try to begin to ho'oponopono for that in my own history. And so I'm gonna sing that song. But anyways, if you guys want to like just I'm gonna stop the stream, and then if you want to stick around, if you don't, it's okay. But if you want to like give your kind of like closing or just like your final thoughts for at least for the panel, whoever wants to go first.
I can go first. I can close with something that came to mind as Lassie was speaking. In another medicine wheel video that I looked into after that stream that Lassie did, where I learned about it. There was one Indigenous scholar who was talking about how there's this phrase, crabs in a bucket. Like if you put crabs in a bucket, they just tear each other down, and people use that phrase a lot to refer to like people just like pulling each other down, trying to like tear each other down. And then since they're tearing each other down, like the crab fisherman person can keep doing their own thing. But what this scholar said was that when they were talking to a friend about it, they said, like, have you ever seen crabs in their like natural environment where they're allowed to like thrive and stuff? They pull each other up, like through the rocks and stuff. And I thought that stuck with me, and I hear that phrase a lot, people using it. But yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, for taking the time to come on. I know it's
having me.
Yeah, it's I know it's it's always a little bit stressful. Akemi just started. I kind of I said, you got to come do this. We don't have enough Uchinanchu people speaking, so we have to really give extra thanks for Akemi for having the courage to come out on this, with me just, being all Silver Spook and going off on these rants. I'm sorry, very intense educational, streams, and I know it's a lot, but I really appreciate you coming, and I do think that people need to hear more from you and from other voices from that part of the world, because it's so rarely heard. I will tell you right now, Danny and Carl Jha, I think personally wanted to do that one Asian Pacific panel because they knew that you would be there, because they had not really talked to people that were of specifically the Ryukyu or Luchu people ancestry. Definitely Carl. So I just want you to know that. So anyways,
yeah, Silver Spook and Lawsuit got me through many a dark night, so I'm honored to be here.
It's always an honor, Akemi, when you're here and we actually get to sit down and talk and talk story. And, it's definitely cool as fuck, and we need to do it more often.
Totally. On that, Sue, you've given us much wisdom. Everybody's very happy, of course, as always, to have you here. But yeah, any as somebody who has suffered the most under specifically this North American, so-called, system, but any final words on anything you want to say? Yeah.
Well, I'll say it this way. When I was a young man, I had much hatred and violence in me. I hated anyone that looked like my adopted family, and that was anyone who had white skin. I would attack. If you looked at me funny, I would jump over tables, wherever or whatever, to get to you and beat the fuck out of you. If you were on a bus and I didn't like you and you reminded me of them, I was waiting till the bus stopped and my stop came, and I would hit you upside the head as I'm leaving and be fuck you if you step off that bus, because you're going to get hurt. I had to change. I had to heal. I had to let my anger go. When I was 24 years old, I finally buried the bullets that I had engraved my whole entire adopted family's name on each bullet. I had 4 bullets with each of their names engraved on it. That's how much anger and rage I had inside of me. That's how much violence I was living. I buried that. I left that alone to heal. And it didn't happen overnight. It takes time to heal. It takes time to grow. But it is something that we must do. As Indigenous people around the world, we have suffered too much not to heal. We need to heal. We need to honor our ancestors and our ancestral ceremonies that have shown us a better way of life for tens of thousands of years since the beginning. And it is important to remember these things. It's also important to remember the things we've been through, the suffering, all of it, the ugliness, all of it, so that we can learn from it as a learning experience to grow from. We have stories in my culture and my people's way of what we would call the rotten bellies. People that we learn from of how not to be and what not to do. A lot of my people say, oh yeah, well, now we're gonna throw these colonizers into the rotten belly process and stories, because it teaches us what not to do, how not to be like, what path not to follow. So I just want to give everyone a little bit of hope, even in this dark and hard time. Because we're facing climate disaster. By 2050, we'll be between 0.3 and 0.6 degree climate increase. 0.3 is literally, we're not going to be doing very well at all at 0.3. 0.6, it's screwed up. And then we have all these other things going. And we need hope and happiness. We need that in our lives. Otherwise, this is where things of suicide come into play. People committing suicide because they just got too much shit inside of them and they can't get it out. They can't heal from it. They're not going anywhere. And rather than reaching out and getting help and changing and healing, they take their lives because they don't see any way out. But we can't allow ourselves to go out that way. We have to do better. We have to be better. We have to start showing ourselves love, respect, kindness, and compassion to all of us. Oh. Okay.
All right. Okay. Yeah, we got to make sure we get all of that out. But yeah, no, that's a great place to end at least the panel of this stream today, the decolonial Thanksgiving Silver Spook panel. Again, we want to thank Lost Sioux, who just spoke, Akemi again, Shaw, who unfortunately had some technical issues, but is literally out there fighting as a warrior with dignity against fossil fuel pipelines in so-called United States and so-called Canada, against huge corporations that are working with the company of Canada, as Justin Trudeau said. And so thanks to Shaw and Saber, of course.
Look at your Twitter There's a Shaw's on a panel that's coming out tomorrow.
Okay.
So
Okay. Oh yeah, and so one more thing about since Shaw could not be with us, we want to bring up that Shaw is going to be on a panel coming up very soon. It's in the Twitter messages you said. Okay. Yeah. So there's going to be a panel called Imperialism and a Hierarchy of Violence. Very appropriate. So just since Shaw can be with us, you can watch this tomorrow. On the over here. So it's Imperialism and a Hierarchy of Violence. I'm sure Holly will put a link to this. And it includes Shaw Meroe, Punahele, and several other speakers. And yeah, so look out for that one. Anyways, so okay, oops. Sorry, I one day I'll have enough people so I can not have to split myself into 10 different production roles. And Holly is doing a lot of them already also. But anyways, it has been so good, and we're going to have to end it here. And thanks everybody for listening, and everybody tuned in. And yeah, don't forget to support your Indigenous people wherever you are on the earth.